For those who don't know, I have a lot of conversations that happen in my head. I know how that might sound, but it's the truth. I think a lot of my epiphanies and revelations come from these scenarios created in my mind where I am usually being interviewed, to be honest. I know that can sound a little pretentious, but I have these moments where I picture myself being asked certain questions, and I don't pay too much attention to where I am or who's asking the question, but I do pay a lot of attention to what I say in response to these questions. And it usually, if not always, leads me to some really profound insights on what's going on with me, how I'm feeling about something, or just some wisdom even. And this happened recently, very recently, and I wanted to share it before the essence of it sort of diminished. I was on my way to go meet a friend for lunch, and as I'm walking to my car, it happened. And that's how it is, it's not me meditating, it just starts. And as I'm getting ready to leave, I see a vision of myself sitting at a podcast. And the question I was asked was, what's one irrational fear you have about yourself? And to my surprise, I answered very quickly. And my answer was, my irrational fear I have about myself is that I'm actually a horrible person and stupid, and everybody knows it but me, and everyone's afraid to tell me. It's like this constant fear that I'm the only one that's not in on the joke, or that there's something about me people can see that I can't. And that was the thread. That was the thread that then led to everything that transpired after, because I think there's some truth there. No, I don't think I'm a horrible, shitty person. And no, I don't believe that I'm stupid. But those are very real fears of mine. And the sort of conversation that evolved from that particular response took me back to childhood. And so the obvious thing is, well, where did that start? Why is that a fear even? And what I said in response was, I grew up in an environment where I was told who I am. I was told who to be. I was told how to act. I was told what is expected of me and who I am before I ever had a chance to figure that out on my own. And so from a very young age, it almost felt like I'm not here to experience myself. I'm not here to learn and explore who I am. I'm here to fit the mold that was placed in front of me. I'm here to meet these expectations of myself. And what that does from a very young age is it disconnects you from yourself immediately. You're no longer prioritizing your feelings or your thoughts or your revelations of life, of yourself, of anything. You're constantly reverting back to this sort of rubric or synopsis that was created before you ever had a chance to even have a say in what is there. Which means you're constantly reaching outside of yourself to know yourself. For me, that looked like a lot of my life being dependent on how other people see me, and that being how I then saw myself. Yes, it's very common. A lot of us might do it, but the extent of the disconnection that created, and therefore the lack of self-trust, was huge. So before I go off on that tangent, I was explaining in this vision, that was the environment I grew up in, which meant that when I was in school, when I started to make friends, how other people saw me was no longer an opinion, it was fact. Because I felt like, well, that must be the truth, because that's what I'm used to. What you say is true about me is probably what it is. How you see me is who I am. The shitty thing about that, I mean, there's plenty of shitty things, but the shitty thing about that for me is I grew up being bullied. You know, I was very different from everybody at my school, culturally, physically, ethnically, mentally, emotionally. Like, I just always felt very different, and apparently that difference was palpable. And as I was talking about this in the vision, I had a funny moment where I said, "Those bitches knew." And I was like, ooh, what? Like, what does that mean? Yes, it was both boys and girls that would tease me as a kid for various reasons. But more often than not, it was the girls who would start it. And either the boys would jump along to be funny or whatever. But very rarely was it boys who would start teasing me. But the girls constantly came at me. And I'm talking second, third, fourth, fifth grade and above. So it's like, you're a kid. You're a kid. In this conversation, when I said, "Those bitches knew," and I laughed, I was referring to the fact that people outside of you see you. They can see you in ways that you can't see yourself. And perhaps that's why it's a little scary to receive feedback from other people on how we show up. Because whether you consciously acknowledge it or not, there is a truth there that there's no way you can be fully conscious of how you are received. You will never experience yourself outside of yourself. The difference is people will always see you through the lens of how they see themselves. And so in this vision, I was explaining that throughout my life, people have really seen me, but their perception of me varied on how they felt about themselves. I experienced throughout my life a dichotomy in this way. There were people who saw me, but it wasn't comfortable for them what they saw. And so they used that as ammo to break me down. The bullying, the teasing, talking shit, making up rumors, the betrayals later on when I got older. You saw the light in me before I did. And because that was threatening, or because it was uncomfortable, you took that and used your power that ultimately I allowed to make me believe that I was less than who I was. At the same time, there were people in my life who saw the same thing. They saw that light in me, and they empowered it. They supported it. They affirmed it. Because those people did not see it as a threat. They didn't see it as competition. They just saw me for who I was. And because of how they felt about themselves, they were able to love me for it instead of trying to use it against me to make themselves feel better. And so as I'm talking about this and explaining the dichotomy of how we are perceived by people based on the way they perceive themselves, and how ultimately everyone's pretty much seeing the same thing, but the response and how they receive that varies on their own self-love, their own self-image. I then realized that the reason that irrational fear of mine exists is because for so long I accepted what anybody would say as truth. So it wasn't until I had the courage and determination to break away from the character I was given to be in order to do the work and find out who I actually am, even if it disappointed people who had certain expectations of me. That's when you take your power back. That's when you're able to have discernment. That's when you're able to know, no, that's not about me. That's about you. And also when you're able to have self-accountability and say, you know what, you're right. That is something I do, and I wasn't aware of it. It's funny because we know this. I always knew this. I knew it mentally, intellectually, rationally. But this experience I had, which lasted all of 5 minutes, I felt it. It's a different knowing now. It's not just intellectual, it's embodiment, it's a feeling. I felt it. I felt the shift. And that's what I mean when I talk about this healing journey and how there's a lot of intellectualization in the beginning because that's the easier route. And it's part of the journey. That's not to talk shit about it. It's just how it is. You absorb this information mentally first because it's safer. And it's not until you're ready that it begins to infiltrate your entire system and moves to the embodiment stage. And the embodiment stage is where it is solidified. That's how it goes from a belief to a knowing. Because you can believe in anything, but when you only believe in something, that means there's a lack of knowing. Once you know something, the belief is gone. I shared all of this with my friend when we had lunch, and that was sort of the conversation we had is, moving from a stage of belief to knowing. I don't believe my name is Bruna. I know my name is Bruna. I don't believe I was born in Lebanon. I know I was born in Lebanon. It's a different energy. I don't believe I'm a good person. I know I'm a good person. I don't believe I'm smart. I know I'm smart. With that comes a shift in energy that gives you your power back. And even then, I hate to use that phrase because I think like we've used it so much now that it feels a little like, ugh, okay, we get it. But there is true power in that knowing. And there's even more power when you grasp it. I think that's why return to self and shadow work have been so important for me to do and create and put out into the world. The tagline is literally helping people remember who they were before the world taught them who to be, because that's my experience. That's my experience. So much of my life was trying to reach the version of myself that I was taught to be, that I was told to be, instead of just remembering who I am and giving myself the opportunity to explore that and come to my own conclusions. And when you are still tied to being taught who you are and accepting that as truth, then you are inevitably also still tied to everyone's opinion and perception of you. Because there's always going to be a part of you that thinks they know better than you do. I think that's also part of the disconnect in why so many people saw me differently than I saw myself. Because the life I'm experiencing, the relationships I'm experiencing, the people I am attracting are the people that young Brew wouldn't believe she was cool enough to be around. You know, it's like, I'm cool, like for real? Like that's who I grew up to be, like a cool person that people not only like, but want to be around and feel inspired by and learn from and enjoy her company. Like that's a huge difference of experience than what I was used to. And again, I can know that's true intellectually. But it wasn't until now that I know it's true energetically. I'm embodying that truth now. I thought that was fascinating. So simple, yet so profound. This constant reminder that part of the risk of being alive is being at the hands of other people, defining who you are. Because you will never truly know yourself until you make it a priority and a conscious effort to do so. And it's not until you strengthen that foundation of self that you're able to build that discernment. Otherwise, whatever they see, you believe is true about you. I'm so grateful I've gotten to a place in my life where the people around me who see me refuse to let me see myself as less than magic, love, beauty, value, all of the good stuff. And they had their work cut out for them, because for so long, what was easier to believe was the shitty stuff. It was easier to believe because there was this core wound of, I'm not good enough. And so anything and everything that supported that claim, I accepted, because I thought that was what was true about me. So unfortunately, for so long, my attention was being paid. I was paying attention in energetic currency to the claims that supported my limiting beliefs, because that also fed my narrative. And the truth of the matter is, there were people along the way, my whole life, who challenged that, who challenged those limiting beliefs, who challenged the fact that I thought I wasn't good enough. But I would dismiss it. I didn't think it was true. I would chop it up to, they're just saying that, or they just feel bad, or that's not what they actually believe. They just want something from me. It was a sad way to live, and it sabotaged a lot of beautiful relationships. So I know we talk a lot about self-love, and obviously return to self is literally all about returning back to yourself. The you that is true to you. Not the you that was constructed and manipulated and pieced together based on what everyone else wanted of you. But it's really so important. And I don't know that we fully recognize that until we move into that embodiment phase. Until that knowing from the mind becomes a knowing in your spirit. I'd like to believe we're all on that journey. And I think you get there when you're meant to. I'm just happy that I got here while I still have time to enjoy it.